Trevor Lawrence with our Pete Prisco, and here's a look at the odds to win the AFC South as we get closer and closer to the start of the 2022 regular season. And the Colts will begin the campaign as the preseason favorites to win. The Titans, of course, the defending champions of the AFC South. Let's welcome in CBS Sports writer Ryan Wilson. Ryan, since we've been talking about them and hearing from them already, let's start with the team with perhaps the most upside, considering how terrible last season was for them, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, the total for the Jags is 6.5. What do you think, over, under, or push?
Yeah, Russ, when you're at the bottom, there's really nowhere to go but up. But as you pointed out, they did have the first overall pick in back-to-back years, so we'll see. I think we sort of saw in that clip with Trevor Lawrence that he is incredibly relaxed. Part of that is because he's going into year two. A bigger part probably is that he no longer is being coached by Urban Meyer. It's Doug Peterson, who is a quarterback's quarterback, it feels like, and he thinks that's going to be best-case scenario for year two for Trevor Lawrence. By the way, Pete Prisco looked incredibly relaxed as well. Can someone get him an apple box? He was a good 4 feet shorter than Trevor Lawrence in that interview. It was pretty distracting to go along with that orange tint that Pete likes to sport this time of year. A couple Pete Prisco shots for you there. What does this mean for the Jaguars, however? And you see Doug Peterson here, who was instrumental in getting the Eagles to that Super Bowl a few years ago. I love the over of 6.5. I heard Pete Prisco and Rick Spielman talk about this earlier from training camp, and Pete thought this was a 7 or 8 win team, and I think that's actually pretty realistic given the offseason signings, given the expectation for Trevor Lawrence in year two. Rick went so far as to say maybe even 9 wins. And look, you're playing in a bad division. That helps with some of the wins. And again, the expectation that your number 1 overall pick at quarterback is going to make some big strides in addition to the guys that they added, like Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, and even Evan Ingram. You hope that to be the case. He'll also get Travis Etienne back, his former teammate at Clemson, who didn't play last year because of a foot injury. So there are a lot of reasons for optimism in Jacksonville. It starts with the head coach and the quarterback, but there are now a lot of complementary pieces around him and Trevor Lawrence that the over of 6.5 looks pretty enticing.
Can't help but agree with you. A lot of optimism in Jacksonville right now. On the other hand, you got the Texans. They got some sort of stink going on right now. It's like you open the fridge and something, is not quite right in there. And I know I'm not the only one smelling that because the odds makers have their total at 4.5. That's terrible. How does that sound to you?
Terrible is a good word for 4.5 wins over a now expanded 17-game season. I sort of like the over. It is sort of a hot mess in Houston, and there's no denying that. They have moved on for Deshaun Watson, so that's one less distraction. He didn't play last year, of course, but they fired David Culley in the offseason after he found a way to win 4 games with a pretty bad football team a year ago, and they hired Lovie Smith. Oh, okay. So it is 1999 again in Houston. So there are questions there. He's a defensive guy. They drafted some defensive players to help on that side of the ball, but you wonder what this means for Davis Mills short-term and long-term. He was impressive at times last year, but unlike Trevor Lawrence and unlike Mac Jones in New England, there was very little pressure on Davis Mills. So he could throw the ball around the yard, have some interceptions, and he wasn't going to come out. That said, he performed relatively well. There are still a ton of questions on both sides of the ball, along the offensive line, who's going to catch the passes, and what Davis Mills will look like in year two, and is Lovie Smith the long-term answer as head coach? We know they like Josh McCown a lot, but they didn't make that happen for obvious reasons. It would have been really weird to hire Josh McCown after firing David Culley. All that said, this team played incredibly hard, so much harder than the Jaguars a year ago under Urban Meyer, and I think that carries over. And I think you might question Lovie Smith as a X's and O's guy, but he's a leader, and players tend to get behind him, at least enough to the fact that I'm going to go over that 4.5, Russ.
All right, Ryan, everybody loves the Colts right now. We're talking about the undisputed offseason winners of the AFC South. That's the way everybody seems to be thinking. Listen, I lived in the D.C. area for a long time. I am very familiar with the plight of so-called offseason victories. What do you think about 9.5 as the total for Indy?
It sounds about right. And then the question you have to ask yourself, this team won 9 games last year, went into the final game of the season, and somehow found a way to lose to the Jaguars and keep themselves out of the playoffs in the process, and probably cost Carson Wentz his job in Indianapolis. Is Matt Ryan, an upgrade over Carson Wentz? Undoubtedly. I don't think anyone would argue that. And if you're willing to concede that, then you probably feel okay going over this 9.5, which I do. You have Jonathan Taylor, one of the best players in football last year, arguably the best running back. Derrick Henry was certainly like a word. You have to figure out the situation at wide receiver if T.Y. Hilton isn't going to be in the plans. And Alec Pierce is someone they drafted out of Cincinnati in round 2. He needs to step up immediately. They still have Michael Pittman, who's going to be a huge part of that offense. They still have Paris Campbell, who they're still waiting to kick it into the next gear. But they have the guy we're now calling Shaquille Leonard at linebacker. He's still there, although he has some injury concerns. And there's some reasons for optimism. You see there, Stephon Gilmore, perhaps the biggest reason is that they moved on from Carson Wentz. And, of course, acquired Matt Ryan in the process. And I think this is going to be a really good football team. I think Matt Ryan was the missing piece a year ago at the quarterback position. Carson Wentz did some things well. A lot of things look familiar from his days in Philadelphia. So I'm going to go over that number. I have a lot of confidence in this team, and I'm on the bandwagon as we sit here in late July.
All right, well, the Titans were the kings of the AFC South last season, and despite all the excitement, including yours and Indy, there's still a lot of respect for the defending division champs. Tennessee's total, like the Colts, is 9.5. What do you make of that?
So I've been pretty optimistic with this division, even though it's not a great division when compared to the other ones. That said, I'm going under this number of 9.5, in part because I still have a bad taste in my mouth with the way the season ended. They were the best team by record in the AFC. Now, they lost their first-round playoff game to an upstart Bengals team that had never won on the road in the playoffs. And they did it in such a way with Ryan Tannehill turning the ball over that left you wondering whether he would be the quarterback as we sit here. Mike Vrabel made it clear that Tannehill is going to remain the quarterback, but I have questions about how long that's going to be the case. Derrick Henry missed a lot of the season with that injury. He came back in the playoffs, wasn't himself, and that's certainly understandable given the layoff. But how much tread is left on that tire as well? There are issues at wide receiver. A.J. Brown was traded on draft day. They drafted Treylon Burks, who I liked a lot coming out of Arkansas. But he had some moments in minicamp that left you wondering what this rookie season may look like. So he'll have a chance to prove himself again. They drafted Malik Willis late on day 2. Roger McCreary is a cornerback out of Auburn who I liked a lot as a day 2 pick. But it comes down to the offense, Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, and the offensive line, and who are going to be the pass catchers in a post-A.J. Brown world. All those things taken together, I don't know if 9.5 is going to happen. I'm going to go under this number after going over for the 3 previous teams we talked about in the AFC South.
All right, Ryan, based on what you've told us about what you think of the totals in the AFC South, I think I have an idea of what the answer to this question is going to be, but I need to ask it anyway. Who do you have winning the division and why?
So it comes down to this. If you're giving me 2-on-2, Matt Ryan and Jonathan Taylor versus Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry, I'm taking the Colts, and for the reasons that Matt Ryan's better than Ryan Tannehill, and Jonathan Taylor, if not better, is certainly younger than Derrick Henry, and hopefully, fingers crossed, less injury-prone if you're Chris Ballard and Frank Reich. So I'm leaning towards the Colts here. I laid out my love affair with them early on in the segment here. I think they have a lot of things going for them, from general manager to coach to veteran quarterback who's now in the right position. They have to sort some things out in terms of depth at wide receiver, but I think the defense is going to be really good when they get Shaquille Leonard back, and I expect them to have very few hiccups. And again, they were 1 win in Jacksonville away to go into the playoffs a year ago. They're a better football team as we sit here. Now, Jacksonville is better. Texans, who knows? And the Titans have questions. But I think that as we sit here, as you asked me this question, Russ, the Colts feel like the team to beat in the AFC South.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.